Welcome, everybody, to the US Deprescribing Network webinar. It is 2:01, and we want to welcome you all here. Today's topic is, what does stakeholder engagement have to do with it? This is a webinar sponsored by the US Deprescribing Network, which is funded by the National Institute on Aging. And I am Dr. Jennifer Chia from the University of Massachusetts, and I co-lead the Investigator Development Corps with Dr. Ken Bookvar from Mount Sinai. We're really super excited to have you all here, and we're really grateful for the stakeholders who have joined us to share their experiences and their engagement with deprescribing research. Before we begin, I want to just take care of a few housekeeping issues. So due to the number of registrants for today's webinar, we've placed the phone lines on mute. So unless you're logged in as a host or panelist, your line is muted. However, we do want to make this interactive and we welcome questions. So we encourage audience participation by using the Q&A feature of Zoom. And we would like you to enter your questions in the Q&A bubble. If you would like your question to be anonymous, you can check the anonymous box before sending. The host will acknowledge questions during the final 15 to 20 minutes of the webinar. And after the webinar, you will receive an email with a short evaluation survey. If you have any technical or logistical questions, we ask that you submit those using the chat box feature. Select the co-host, Gabrielle Schiller, and chat privately. Please make sure that you're identified either by your name or your participant ID so that the webinar host will be able to troubleshoot any problems that arise with audio or other issues. And I also want to make sure that we extend a huge thanks to the folks behind the scenes who make this happen, including Gabrielle Schiller at Mount Sinai, Jonathan Norton at Johns Hopkins, as well as Melina Spar and Anel Rizzo at UCSF, and Jay Reports at UMass Medical School, who do the amazing work behind the scenes to make this happen. And so now let me transition and introduce our panelists. So first we have Carol Lee Thorpe, who is the Executive Director of the California for Independent Living Systems, where she provides strategic direction and day-to-day management for ILS's California market at the intersection of clinical care and the social determinants of health. Carol Lee leads the development of innovative care management initiatives that support the delivery of cost-effective, high-quality healthcare services, with particular focus on vulnerable populations. Carol Lee received her Master of Business Administration from Pepperdine University. Next, we have Laura Trejo. Ms. Trejo is a gerontologist with a Master of Science in Gerontology and a Master of Public Administration and graduate certificate in long-term care administration. And she is currently pursuing a doctorate in social work, all from the University of Southern California. Go USC and Trojans. She is the first Latina appointed to the level of general manager for the city of Los Angeles and is responsible for the overall administration of the Los Angeles Department of Aging, serving one of the largest and most diverse concentrations of older persons in the US. She serves as a technical and policy advisor to the mayor and city council and represents the city of Los Angeles before the public, community, and private groups on matters affecting senior citizen affairs. And also joining us is Phyllis Willis. Dr. Willis is a senior director of older adult programs at the Watts Labor Community Action Committee, a nonprofit organization. She has worked for more than 20 years in economically disadvantaged communities in South Los Angeles to increase health equity. Dr. Willis supervises program expansion and delivery of self-management, benefits enrollment, and social services in more than 40 zip codes, and is a Stanford University chronic disease and diabetes self-management master trainer who oversees 5 multi-purpose centers where over 1,800 meals are delivered daily to homebound seniors. So thank you very much, and let me hand this over to all of them, and Dr. Catherine Sarkisian from UCLA, who will be moderating the panel.
Thank you, Jennifer. I will let that pro USC comment slip because I work so well with my friends and colleagues at USC, including Laura, of course. So we're really lucky to have all three of these wonderful panelists so I'm a geriatrician at UCLA, and I have the great opportunity to co-direct our Stakeholder Engagement Core along with Nikki Brandt. And I can say I've had the fabulous opportunity to work with all three of these amazing women on multiple projects over the past decade or maybe even longer. So I thought, first question, I'm going to give you guys an easy question to start. I was wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about your experience as a stakeholder in research projects, and then talk about what are the benefits? Like, why bother? What's in it for you as a stakeholder? Why would you take time out of your extremely busy life to work with researchers as stakeholders? Laura, you want to go first?
I'll start. For me, it has been a choice of a career to collaborate and hold hands with my colleagues in academia. As somebody working with lots of underserved, highly marginalized older adult populations, I've always felt it was an important part of including the voices of our community into the research process so that it would influence the empirical knowledge of the field as it continues to evolve. So for me, it was never like a choice of not doing it. It was like how to do it the most effectively to ensure that the voices of the consumers and the persons that I was working with in communities were heard. And I know that for many of them, that's always been a huge chasm between their expertise, their lived experience, and the academic community's understanding and appreciating of those experiences. So for me, I was kind of one of those linking bridges between the two populations of the scientists and the community experts that I consider are experts at what they're trying to share with us. So that's been my reason for continuing to be part of a highly engaged partnership with colleagues over the years.
Thank you, Laura. That's really helpful. Phyllis, do you want to add to that or share different experiences or different drivers of why you do this?
I just want to say that this experience for me is to heal the community, and a community that was pretty much out of sight to researchers in the beginning when I started 17 years ago. There wasn't a lot of, there were researchers coming to the community for different purposes, but we didn't know what to ask for, I believe, at that time. And when I came on board 17 years ago, we cover, like I said, 40 zip codes, but primarily South LA, Watts, Compton, all those places you hear about. Laura has been a great leader and holding my hand in this community and mentor. And over the years, we have found, seniors coming to our senior center with medication from 2012, and not having health insurance, and losing their life and their limbs. And so that was my driving force, who could help bring this to a platform where they can make change, where there could be real change. And of course, lots of researchers came from UCLA and USC. And then one day I just said, no, we're not going to do any more partnering. And they asked why. And I said, well, you want them to come to the university, you have to come to the community. You have to come where they're at. You have to visit this community. These are folks that make between $2,000 on the west side near Crenshaw, if you know the LA area, to the south side over near Avalon Central, about $989 a month. So there's a lot of stigmas and biases associated with these communities, but there's a lot of resilience in these communities. Sure. And they can learn how to reduce stroke. And one day I told this researcher no, and she asked me why, and I told her that. She said, well, what should we do? I said, you need to come to the community. How do we do that? And I told her how to do that. I said, you need to call somebody who could tell you a little bit more about that. And I said, Dr. Sarkisian. And she said, well, because I did a project and she was the first one to come to the community to say, what do we need? And I thought, that's a different approach. And I began to tell her 4 or 5 things because there's a basket full. And we did a great 5-year project on walking Then it went on to stroke with others. And so it became that model for how to engage with stakeholders, right? There's a lot of assumptions that are not correct, right? When you come to the community, it's that they're not going to understand what I'm trying to say. Some of the doctors would say. And when they came to the community, I said, oh, they'll understand you. And we stood up and asked how many had a stroke in your family, or have you had a stroke? And they all stood up, right? They understand. You're here to help them, but there's trust that's involved. So I don't want to go too far because I know you have other questions, but that was the biggest benefit. And then also I had to make them aware that we need to be paid, you know? Okay, so what's in the benefit for us as an agency? How will you benefit us? You know, we need these folks, you need these folks, we need what you have. It's a tough marriage, but how can we do it together that we benefit, you know, economically, as well as our community is number one, you know, if we're taking care of them. So that's the benefit that was brought here, is to learn how to partner better, how to do research better, and come to the community and see for yourself. And I tell you, the research assistants, and it was many, maybe 20, they came to the community, they were looking around. When they got there, we couldn't get rid of them. So whenever they saw on the news, they were like, well, I'm going to work in this community I think you did have one doc that decided to do some work in the community when he went on to further his education. So it helped us. They loved them. And I think you have to talk about race, whether you're Latinx, whether you're African American. Right. We had to talk about that. Catherine, they were, who's this white lady? You know, well, and the research students, oh my God, this is what we see on the news, or their gangs. So all that has to be on the table. Yeah. And we put it out there, and I think they're still doing research projects on that today, if I'm not mistaken. We still use that curriculum, which was a culturally responsive, which is my other platform. It was culturally responsive to Latinx, to African Americans. And my resident service coordinator, who works at senior housing sites, is still providing that curriculum called Worth the Walk to our seniors. And they really love it. So that's my little long story.
Thank you, Phyllis. It really brings me great pleasure to hear you and Laura say that you feel that our collaborations has been a successful vehicle for getting the voice of the community and the older adults that you work with out there. I should also say we failed to introduce Carmen Reyes, who is the Community Outreach Director for US Deprescribing Research Network Stakeholder Engagement Corps. And I remember that first meeting, Phyllis, when Carmen and I came to meet with you, and I'd never met you before, and you were skeptical appropriately. And you mentioned trust. It's not something that happens overnight. Yeah. So Carolee, how about you? Will you share your story? What's in it for you? I remember meeting you at St. Barnabas when you had like a to-do list a mile long and a million things going on and clients knocking on your door and managers. So why did you take the time to collaborate with us and other teams of researchers?
Well, I guess I know that I have to say thank you to Phyllis and Laura for pushing that door open so wide, because it was an easy decision for me. My response was, oh no, how can we make this work? Because it is so obvious. I think my professional work has been with vulnerable populations at the intersection of clinical care and the social determinants of health. These are populations that, as Phyllis was saying, don't often have a voice, aren't considered, are a statistic, and they are not strong advocates for themselves. Having advocates like Phyllis and Laura have truly transformed things and the research. So that's what excited me to open this up. And I'm also deeply in the practical world. It's very easy for research to seem to be something that's interesting, we know it's important, but how does it affect the people we are working for and caring for? And my second experience, so in the senior center, it was an obvious thing to do. These people that I'm working every day to have their lives enriched, to give them a voice, give them an opportunity to participate and impact their life and become voices, become advocates for the possibilities of better health, improved access, less prescription, whatever it is, was an obvious structure and a brilliant approach. my second experience as a stakeholder has been reviewing research, community-based research proposals. And I don't know if you all remember my first year, I'm like, what are these people do? They don't know, you know. And then I realized why a person from the community, a stakeholder, is reviewing these proposals. And it's both, those are both two dramatic ways, and I know we're going to talk about suggestions and how to make it work, that make a huge difference in the accessibility of the information and the collaboration.
Yeah. Thank you, Carolee. Yeah, I should, with Carmen's leadership, Carolee has been one of our, and Phyllis and Laura, you both reviewed too, for our Resource Center for Minority Aging Research Center. And thanks to Mike Steinman and Cynthia Boyd, the leaders of our SDEN, we have community engagement researchers, stakeholders reviewing our scientific proposals as well, as Laura knows. Okay, so that's the good part of being of the partnership. Now I want you to talk about, if you don't mind, please, what are the challenges? I know Phyllis talked a little bit about trust and people not thinking that they can take the time without paying. What are other challenges and how have they been resolved over the years? Laura, we're back to you.
I'll tell you, as my colleagues were speaking, one of the thoughts that came to mind was how important it is to assist the researchers to understand how to reframe their requests. Because one of the things that I've always, and Catherine and I went through this when we first met, we're skeptical because everybody wants our access. Basically, they want us to hand over the keys and don't ask any questions, just walk away. The responsibility, as I think I shared with Catherine, I said, you know, it's my face in the community that is letting you in. And it's my trust that I built over, you know, a lifetime. And so when working with social researchers as trying to engage in this work, it's really important for people to understand that it's not just about what you need. Usually that's how the conversation starts, with the list of the laundry list of what the researcher wants. I need this, I need 25 pairs, I need that, I need that. And I can hear that. But when they walk in, usually you send them to me when they've had a challenge accessing communities. And usually I tell them, I'm your target, give me the speech. And the speech usually goes, let me tell you what I want from you. And never is in the conversation, as Phyllis said, what do I get from helping you? How is this helping me? How is this improving the quality of my life, community, whatever? And it's in that process of iteration, of discussion with the research partners that we get to, I think, a respectful approach of entering the community, because it does have to change their frame of reference. The frame of reference, I appreciate. You're trying to meet research goals and objectives that you've received funding for. Or you need a publication, whatever. I understand and appreciate that. But for the community, Catherine will attest, I always say, what services are they getting, Catherine? How are they going to benefit from me helping you? And I think it would behoove researchers, when they're trying to really genuinely engage in stakeholder processes, to really think about, what am I bringing to the table? What am I offering this community in terms of how am I helping to move the agenda, whether it be their health disparity issues? How do I present that? Because otherwise it just feels incredibly selfish and incredibly ivory tower focus. Like, this is what I want. Like Phyllis said, everybody has to drive across town to you. Well, no, they really shouldn't. And that's part of us creating a different reality for how we work and are effective. So for me, it's always been about, how do we reframe? Not that we have to change the research proposal or the goals, but how do we present them? How do we understand, and how do we discuss them respectfully? And too often, I think, especially for junior researchers, they are so excited to get out there that they just come out almost like a bulldozer, and the community reacts almost in the same effort to say stop. go away. I don't want to talk to you. Usually that's when I come into the picture. I get to talk to people when they've been rejected. And it's not that that's what the community wanted to do. It wasn't that they wanted you to go away. It was just you were not coming in with the right framework and the right set of understandings of how to be respectful of where you're entering, especially if you're not familiar with those communities that you're walking into. And I know Phyllis and I have talked about this at this point for more than almost 2 decades, about how critical it is for faculty to really work with community confidants like us, because we will push back hard too, but we'll do it in a collaborative approach so that you're doing it with us rather than going and doing it in public with the community, when then we have to go do damage control, which really becomes even harder because I have to call everybody and go, no, they're really good people. We're gonna make this happen. That takes a lot more effort. So my recommendation would be, if you want to avoid a lot of the pitfalls, start with building relationships with people like us in communities, linking people that can help you understand how to enter communities so that you will be more likely to be accepted.
I appreciate that. I'll just add one side from the researcher point of view. We had a project where we were going into 26 different senior centers, and it's no joke. You can walk into senior center, not know anyone, and say, oh, I'm with Laura Trejo. And then all of a sudden the staff like comes running over. Oh, you're working with Laura, Ms. Trejo. Okay, great. Here's this. And then come on, people, come join this project. And then just to
Laura
give a concrete, concrete example of what you were talking about, what's in it for the community. So for example, a couple different NIH trials that we've had where we've randomized people to get a physical activity intervention or not. We figured, in working with you all, it's unacceptable for someone to be randomized to the control group and not get the intervention at all. So we had a whole other arm where everybody got the intervention after the study was over, just to do the right thing by the community.
Absolutely.
So how about you, Phyllis? You talked about challenges. Can you talk about any specific challenges and how it was resolved, or advice that you have?
Well, I think that Laura hit on it. The most important thing is building the relationships. It's either building a relationship with us or it's building a relationship with that leader. It could be a director in a senior center, because it's whoever has the trust of the community. When you say their name, oh, she sent you. So that right away, they don't have a lot of questions. But one of the things that I heard early on when we first started 17 years ago, well, what about Tuskegee? You hear all of those research debacles that have happened in history to African Americans, and also there's been Latinx involved in those research projects that have not been ethical. So I think the building relationship with the researchers, with the leaders in the community, like Laura, myself, even my directors, my nutrition director, half the community, he cooks the food, trust him, right? He says, do it, it's going to happen. So understanding the power of those types of relationships, where maybe a researcher or someone from academia wouldn't bother with those people. But those are the heart of getting done what you need to have done. I think one of the problems, and I think Laura touched on it as well, is that when you come to the community, you do research because it's whatever it is of the moment. If it's walking, if it's stroke, if it's whatever. Now, as I said, we have a basket full of issues of chronic health. We could talk about physician bias. We could talk about deprescribing. We could talk about the ratio of physicians in South LA compared to West LA, all the disparities that our communities experience. But building those relationships and also taking a look at doing your homework. A lot of time researchers want us, we already know what we're doing, but they may not want to come in and do the homework. Or once that research is over, or this is no longer important, they're gone, right? So I think one of the themes that I've seen over 17 years, and I will say not with Worth the Walk, but I will say with mostly all the research just about that I've been involved in, is that once that's over with, then everybody's on to something else, which is fine. You have to keep publishing, you have to keep doing what you need to do, but you have to figure out a way, how can we make this sustainable in that community? whether you're leaving it with a case manager to say, hey, okay, this is, we do medical, Laura knows that we do medication management, and deprescribing is a fit. How do you train a bunch of case managers? They're not doctors or nurses, but we do medication management, my case managers. And so them just to be aware of what to look for. They do have the books here. They do go in and say, wow, they still have that person. I was looking at a research paper before I got on. I looked at something last night about deprescribing, and it showed that people 70 and over were still taking aspirin. And that should have been deprescribed because they're taking other drugs for blood pressure that could thin out their blood. So I'm not a doctor, but it's one of those deprescribing issues. And so just those basic things that I do hear my case managers talk about when they look through their medication, they've looked in the book enough to know, wait a minute, there's something wrong here, right? So how do you take what you're doing to make that sustainable? And the innovative part of that, I think it's the theme that in the pattern I've seen throughout all research that we did that 10 years ago. Well, if it's working and it's helping and it's reducing that issue or that whatever that barrier has been, because you only have so many physicians with so much time, you can train them on their side. A small percentage are going to follow through with that, but a larger percentage of folks in the community, who do you call when you go to your doctor, right? You can call someone to say, hey, I'm going to the doctor, but don't forget, did you write these 3 questions down? Ask them about the medication. So I think that sometimes it's a silo where it's academic and they do use the community because they want to meet the target population. But I would love to see, and I've seen it's very rare that sustainability happens at the beginning of the research project. So, okay, we're moving on, but we trained these case managers and we've given Laura something, even if it's a cheat sheet, of what they can give. We give evidence-based programs, chronic disease, self-management. They go to those sessions once, maybe twice in a year. And we do have a section on what to ask your doctor, but we deal with low health literacy here, right? 58% of older adults graduated from high school in South LA. So we're dealing with low health literacy. Sometimes it's a disability, so they need support. And they don't have the same support systems as they do in West LA. They don't have parents there, children there rather, helping them or supporting them. We're kind of it for them. So I think the big challenge is these are really great projects, research projects, and the research is needed to validate what we do. It is so important, but it's more important if it's really actually saving lives, if it's really actually improving the medications that are unnecessary to be reduced, or the dose to be reduced or whatever the need may be. So I just would like to see that you prove your research, you have a research question, okay, you answer that, but how do you help the community? I think that piece has kind of been missing for some time.
Catherine, something, and I apologize, Carolee.
No.
But okay. I don't want to lose this thought. Phyllis just brought something I think it's very critical, that we want to recommend that as part of a stakeholder engagement, that you think of Phyllis said sustainability. I think that's a critical word. That if you notice, our relationship with you, Catherine, we speak about it in decades, not in studies. It wasn't one study and you walked away. It was we built from one study to the other study to the other study, and that's how we were building trust and relationship with communities that then become communities that you are welcome and trusted in. So also part of stakeholder engagement also has to look at a bigger arc than the current study in front of us. But to really look, the research centers, the academic institutions, look at building relationships with people that are more than one study long. Because basically, I think the most successful stakeholder engagement opportunities are to those researchers that have built relationships that are deep and have existed. And so therefore, you're able to do, I think, more innovative and creative work together. And at least that has been my experience, that I work sort of at a higher level with people that we've known each other, so we don't have to start the relationship building every time, but rather we're building from one level to the next. Catherine, you mentioned, our last work where you actually added an intervention arm for making sure that all of our clients at the classes. Normally that would not even be a possibility if we were just starting to get to know each other. We wouldn't know that we could bring that up to your attention and that you actually have an opportunity to help us. We might just be kind of a little bit less likely to even begin helping because we don't even know we could ask for that. But because we're used to working with you, we're used to kind of coming with our priority list and saying, could we? Is it possible? And we trust that you will explore it with us. And so I also think that's something that Phyllis and I have seen through the years, and that's why I was resonating with your comments, Phyllis, that sustainability about engagement process and stakeholder involvement is a relationship that takes time, and it should kind of survive different research projects that we're working with you as part of your team that you're building over the years as a research scientist. So that would be my my hope, that people take away and start saying, how do I build those relationships? Because it may be that for right now you don't need me, but it's kind of fun to know that in 2 years when we get another grant, and you will come back and I'll be, we know each other and we continue to work. And so that's what I would want for the faculty to be thinking of. How do they build those relationships and think about long-term, not just the study in front of me?
I'm really glad you shared that, Laura. I know for me personally, it's been one of the most meaningful pieces of my entire career is these relationships. And then it becomes bi-directional. If someone on your team calls and needs a letter of support for this grant that's being submitted, or you have this project that you need a research team to evaluate, it goes both ways. So then, Carolee, I'm going to take this and ask you a hard question. So a lot of the people on this call haven't had they're new to research, and they haven't had the opportunity to work with wonderful community stakeholders for 10 years. So how does a junior person come in and establish trust? Any recommendations for those people on the call?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As Laura was talking, I was thinking of in my days of managing volunteers. I used to say, now I don't have them all in the closet ready to just come out when you call. And I think that it's critically important. I have two really important things. One is in the context of relationship. Yes, relationship. You're all busy, you have objectives. But one of the things I found is that shared vision and shared values, finding those intersections are a major secret to success. Because we are people who all we do is overcome obstacles every day. Get to yes from no, get to solutions from no solution. That's what we're about. But you're right, someone coming in, if you're as a researcher, if your end game is getting the research done, we know it's bigger than that because of our experience. But if you're about transforming health, giving people access to care, eliminating unnecessary treatments, medication, whatever it is, finding that connection, that value is the starting point. Whether it's doing your research, read up on people, talk to people who might refer you, as we've already discussed, to that source of research subjects, participants. The other thing is recognize that there's already a conversation going on. There's already priorities. There's already issues, coming in and learning what's the priorities of the organization, what are the emphasis right now, what are the new projects, where are the interests, tells you there that it kind of can open the door to that shared values and shared vision connection. And I think sometimes we come in asking for what our needs are without checking what the environment is, what the opportunity is, what the setting is. Is it a good match? Those are my quick ones.
No, it's great. I hear you. That shared vision piece is so important. If there were, you touched on the deprescribing issue, and since the theme of this we're a deprescribing center, and as Laura knows, I think we submitted a PCORI grant Carmen knows this, that was maybe, gosh, like 10 years ago. And we were going to go in and teach people about reducing low value care and getting less services. It wasn't specifically deprescribing, but I remember vividly, your reaction was absolutely no way. I have been spending my whole career telling the older adults that I'm advocating for that they need more care, that they've been left out. So what are your thoughts about messaging less is more in the case of medications to communities that are already not getting their fair share of resources for so many other important, their hypertension is undertreated in African Americans, and people unnecessarily die. So how do we thoughts about how we message this less is more to vulnerable communities?
Well, I'll jump in. I think you said it. It's about working together to create the messaging, to test the language. Because usually when I serve, I'm sort of the wall that you throw the spaghetti on to see what sticks, right?
Yeah.
I react viscerally the way that I would. That's kind of how I walk into a room and I go, okay, I'm just going to hear it and I'm going to react to it. So that way I give you that permission to say, what was that about, Laura? I mean, you went off the deep end on that one. And you can say back to me, but let me tell you why this is important. I go, yeah, see, I didn't know all that. And so I just reacted to the message. And so I think that that's also another role that we can play, is that we are good listeners, and we can react and help to craft messages that are thoughtful and are intentional. I can tell you right now, and I'm sure everybody on the call is struggling with it, vaccination rollout. We have communities that are highly at risk who are staying away. And that's a lot of people not wanting to deal with the history of communities and access to healthcare. And it's coming home to roost in very negative ways.
Right.
And I'm in rooms all the time right now trying to reshape the language of how we walk back into communities and really embrace and understand that communities are not necessarily rejecting a service. They're expressing an experienced history. And it's happening in real time right now. We're seeing it in lots of different forums right now. So my recommendation is that's why people like us are important as stakeholders, because we're already supportive of the work that the academic sector is trying to do. We understand it. And if we're reacting, now imagine and multiply it times the community at large. And so that's what we can bring in. And you and I have done this, Catherine. I've done it with Phyllis, not as much with Carol Lee, but we've sat in rooms and, negotiated. With Carmen, we've done this a lot. Negotiated what is the right way of communicating something, even as simple as a flyer, which could be a deal breaker if you get it out there and it has the wrong language, where people just go, no. And so that's where I think we have to be thoughtful and engage with one another. That's where this is a powerful dynamic, is where we can create and really look at language and its meaning in communities that may be very different than what the researcher thought or what the community understands. So that's, that would be what I offer to that question.
Well, Phyllis, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, Laura just hit it right on that little story you had between the two of you, where Laura said, absolutely no way, right? So I was, when I first heard the prescribing, I had the same thought. I didn't speak it, but I thought, we have such disparities in healthcare. We have like 1,100 physicians in South LA to every 100,000 folks. And that's 49 physicians, where there's 1,100 in West LA and 49 physicians to every 100,000 in South LA. So that right away, I thought, well, we need more physicians, and we need more that have been trained, right, about bias, trained about racial injustice, also we deal with a lot of structural and institutional racism inside healthcare systems. And so, you know, we need more care so people don't have 5-year-old metformin in their purse, right? But then as I thought about it a little bit deeper, right, then I began to think about all the experiences of our case managers where we do have so many older adults that are being prescribed medications and they already have the same medication but a different type, or they had an injury and now they're on opioids and now they're being overprescribed for pain, right? So I began to do a little research to learn what you're talking about, right? So I began to do a little research and I saw there was some research on community dwelling and deprescribing, and they had some on African American and Latinx, but no one really hit a solution, right? They could just talk mostly about the problem. And then that made me to begin to think about innovative ways, which I've already discussed, you know, how it could help the case managers. So I think there is a place for it, but I think the way, as Laura said, the way that it is framed does not appeal. When you mention anything about health equity, that's like a huge one. Health equity, low health literacy, folks not being able to get in to see the doctor just to get their insulin, you know, takes them 2 months unless we call and say, wait a minute, they die, they're on your hands, right? So, but looking beyond that, I think the way that it's being framed now, deprescribing, it's kind of targets physicians. You know, it's kind of trying to change their behavior, which I think is really hard to do because they have 15 minutes, 10 minutes to see a patient. So it's not all them. Many times even here, you think of 49 physicians per 100,000. How long do they have to see a patient? They don't have a lot of time to spend. So it's not totally, you know, on them. They have a lot of other pressures going on. So how could you how would you frame this? Because this is my other platform, one size does not fit all. So you look at African Americans over on where our other 2 senior centers are, those homes over there, the median income for Ladera, that's mostly African Americans, about $9,000 a month. You come over here, it's $989 a month. You know, there may be a different educational level for older adults, which they have a large population of older adults, more than we do over here. So how do researchers learn how to message, like Laura said, for each population? I can't tell the same thing to this certain group as I'm going to tell to the West LA, right? You know, it's just it's really how you frame everything from nutrition to what you're trying to do. And so I think and the only way they're going to understand that, the folks that are working on this project, is they have to learn about the community, the poverty levels in that community. Just because a person can't read or write, they do understand what you're talking about. They are resilient, or they don't speak English. There's someone that can translate for them, and they do know how to speak to them in their language. Or how do you message that? One campaign that can just message why it's important to tell a friend you're going to the doctor, right? What prescription, just a simple message. What should I ask my doctor? And then there's someone they could talk to, right? Whether it's the case manager, their neighbor, there's someone from their church. So I think that has to be thought out before it's built in a silo in an academic setting. You have to get the users involved from the community to tell you. I was doing a project not long ago, and I think I know a lot about diabetes, but I learned a lot from my focus group. They told me a lot of things that I didn't know, and that I should have included in my questions that I'm going to be doing in a survey. So that I think is missing again. It's another theme of research that you can read, you can look at the CHISH, you can look at a lot of things, but until you come to the community, even if it's to meet with the leaders, or you take somebody on a tour, which I've done that before for funders, and they told me themselves from Washington, D.C., coming down to take a look at our community and our work. Wow, this is something I would never even think it was this way from it's a lot what you told me, but just going around, it took us like 30 or 40 minutes just to go around the community to show me the main places that you serve, you know, and it's good for a lot of reasons because it results in funding too. So that's another good thing. But the point
I really like your point about one size does not fit all. And I want to take we've had a couple excellent questions that have come in on the chat. And one from Jinjiao Wang, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. it seems that whenever the word research is mentioned, stakeholders get automatically alerted, even though the ultimate goal of research is to benefit the stakeholders. Is there a way to frame the invitation to contribute to research so that people are more welcoming instead of guarded? Carol, I think we haven't heard from you
I'm
in
like
a while.
this,
You want to take
okay.
that one? Yeah.
You know, it goes right back to the term deprescribing. Package your project. You know, one thing that community-based research is very different than, oh, what's the term? Pure research or something where it's
basic
just
science lab research.
Basic research.
Yeah.
There we go. You know, and it's appealing because it says it has need. Don't just give a title, give what the benefit, what the vision is, what it will do for you.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's so critically important. Know your audience. Do your research on who you're trying to engage.
And I think
Right.
that's where stakeholders can become absolute, just the most precious resource. They will provide us the language that we need to communicate. And I'll share an example just to share one of my worst nightmares in life. I put out information and I used one word, and I turned off an entire community from wanting to participate with me. And the words were caregiver burden. I translated it very adequately into Spanish to convey the concept. And when no one solicited to participate, I went back to the community with a focus group. And the focus group politely refused to tell me because they did not want to embarrass me because I had used it publicly. Finally, one of the stakeholders came up to me as we were saying goodbye and whispered in my ear. And she said, "My daughter, do you really want to know?" And I said, "Please." And she said, "Take that word off of everything. We are very angry and we do not have that." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And we took out the word and everything changed. But had I not had the ability to go back out with my research partners and say, "Please help me. I know I've made a terrible mistake and I don't know what it is." Sometimes we get called to help when something's failing, but people don't want to go back and ask the stakeholders, where did we lose you? Where did we go wrong? What language did we use that was so inappropriate or so offensive in this case that you rejected the very thing that we were trying to do to help? And so my recommendation is to own it, to say, you know what, sometimes we will make mistakes. That's part of the work. It doesn't make us bad people, and it doesn't make this unneeded research or unwelcome research. In fact, the community may be waiting for you to say, "Please help me." And so I want to encourage, especially because I've worked with a lot of junior faculty who have had not very successful pilots and other engagements. And my recommendation is, it's okay. That's how we all learn. And communities are waiting for us to be humble enough to say, "Please help me. I don't know. I am not Korean American. I don't know your life experience. I am not African American. I don't know. I'm sure I used language that was offensive. I did not mean to. But you need to help me so that we can do this right thing together." I think that what we found is incredibly generous communities who want to help us and wants us to be successful in caring for their communities. I haven't found a community when I made a mistake I said, "Go home and never come back." On the contrary, I found people holding my hand and saying, "Let me show you. Let's do it together." That's when it changes. That's when stakeholder engagement becomes real, and it's a real partnership. When you're willing to, to also embrace when things are not working well and not blame the community for, quote unquote, not wanting your wonderful research intervention. Because oftentimes that's not what they're communicating. They're reacting to something else that maybe you're not aware. And I think Phyllis mentioned that very well, that people don't know the community. So sometimes just even doing a tour so that it checks into your biases, it can be helpful. So that would be
I'm really glad you used the word humility. I think that that's something that we definitely need more of in the world right now, and
Mhm.
definitely in research. So one of the hats Carmen and I wear is mentoring even undergraduate students who want to get experience working in the community. And one big mistake I made was the course ended up being, you could take it for grades in the beginning. And we had this one guy who took the course just thinking it would be an easy A and help his GPA. It's really hard to get A's at UCLA. And he was horrible. He was completely, we always train all our RAs. You are, the minute you pull into that parking lot, you are representing the community. And we do a lot of training, but this guy was just, he had no humility. He was not there to learn. He was there for the wrong, his intentions were not good. I wish everyone on the call could go to Bradley Multipurpose Senior Center and see Phyllis in action, or go to Carolee. I haven't seen you as much in your new job, but back when you were working at St. Barnabas, which is an amazing organization, about half Korean American and half Latino, and everybody, it's a beautiful, wonderful place. I can't wait for seniors to get back there in person. We have one other question that came in on the chat, which is also an excellent question. When reviewing grant applications, what has stood out to you as missing or incorrect? What are some lessons that the people on the call can learn from your experience as grant reviewers? Carolee, you've probably done the most grant reviews.
I have a few opinions here for what they're worth. Number one, read the instructions. Make sure you're responding to the grant requirements, number two. And I would say engage stakeholders like us, like people, when you're conceiving of the project, because then you have that perspective. I would say don't, and the third thing would be, again, follow the instructions, answer the questions that are asked, or address the subjects that are presented. Have real stakeholders. So people who are signing a letter, I'm thinking of one that hurt me. It was a really great progress. It was a really great proposal, but the letter of support said only what this researcher was doing, that he was working here or that had these projects. There was nothing about confidence in their design. It didn't seem that the sign-on knew anything about the project or had that value. And if you're doing community linked research, I would certainly articulate the benefit of this. Not just generating the data, the benefit to the greater community, I guess I would say.
A tip that I would share is that I think Carolee just exemplified it, is that people like us actually do read the application very carefully, and that we are connecting dots between what the call was for and what you're operationalizing. So if you're saying, I would just read a few weeks ago, and they were very superficial stakeholder engagement. Yet this entire thing was about stakeholder process. And so we were reading and being very skeptical as to whether or not this study actually got the point of the request. And so we read things carefully. We try to, if you heard Carolee, she said, we read the letters and we read for content as well, and for intent. And so just, make sure that, I'd rather have one really well-written support letter that tells me that somebody really knows you than 14 that say, yeah, this is a great study, we'd like to support it. And yeah, that's important. But if they don't really know you and it's just like your boilerplate that they're just signing from, we can see that too. And so my recommendation again, and I think it goes back to relationship building, when people know you, they write a personalized letter that describes the relationship and that says, we've been working together for 5 years. This is our third study together. Or, we've been working in a work group together. That makes it a little bit stand out. It makes you highly more competitive than the other folks who haven't bothered to create those opportunities for themselves. And it could be something, Phyllis and I are working with a collaborative right now. We've now created a whole committee on research because we were drawing so many junior faculty that we wanted them to feel really welcome in there. But now they're part of a 180 member community-based collaborative. And so we know that when they have needs, now they have an entire network to reach out to. And they've been sort of just coming to be, really good community partners, not because they were doing any particular research or any work driver that had them there. It was just building their own network and their own opportunities. So that would be my recommendation. Wherever you are, seek those groups out. You will be highly valued.
It's a great
I don't
point.
mind even getting bullets. If someone wants a letter, it would be great if you reflect on this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add to what Laura said. I think you covered everything I would have said. I think going back to what I said originally is that if you know your community and you know your funder, even if you, many times I write lots of proposals, I have to get letters of support. And if I don't know you well, I'm going to go online and learn about you if I can't talk to you,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And I'm going to make sure when I do talk to you, I'm going to align some of those interests you have into what I'm trying to get for this proposal. And that works well, because many times I talk to people, they'll say, well, just write it and send it to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I write it because I know what they are interested in, right? So I think that's really important. And like Laura said, you can tell if someone is just writing for a teen. And I had someone from a national funding source say, I'd rather have, just like Laura said, I'd rather have 1 or 2 good letters than 15 from all these different places, right?
Right.
They mean a lot more. So I would just say that if you do that, many times you can write a proposal that's not that great, but if you got the right letter of support, that's the reputation that's getting you through the door.
Mm-hmm.
That's been my experience over the years.
Well, I am so thankful to each of you for your generous sharing of your expertise and advice to this wonderful group. I think we have pretty big group of over 50 participants listening in. So thank you so much, Phyllis, Laura, and Carolee. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks to Carmen for helping put together the questions, and to Jennifer and Ken for organizing the session. So, and Gabby as well, and Jonathan and Malena. There are a lot of people made this happen. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for engaging us.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for all of your time. It's super, super valuable. And I know I learned a lot. I'm just going to do a few housekeeping issues. This was really wonderful. I want to thank everybody for attending, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that there's a recording of this webinar that's going to be available on the website for your colleagues who may not have been able to come. Please fill out the short evaluation survey that will pop up right after the webinar. And please don't forget that we have our annual meeting coming up May 27th. And it will be a virtual meeting, but so we can talk to each other more about what's happening in deprescribing research and how to further that. And more information on how to register is at the USDN website. So have a great day. And for those of you in the JIO cohort, we look forward to the next part of this. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.